have roused at bouts of cutting up cinema like it's never been cut up before. There's going to be reviews. There's going to be interviews. There's going to be hijinks. And there's going to be a whole lot of cutting in this room. The Cutting Room Movie Podcast. Coming at you 128 kilobytes per second.
If you don't know already, I'm Lieutenant Tom Detloff, Cutting Room Movie Squad. I work in the rough part of Podcast City, a place that'll leave you feeling like you've been listening to Donald Trump talk for days while being kicked in the balls by the cast of The Big Bang Theory. Sure, there are other podcasts out there that will bore you to death, but this one makes you feel like a man, not a phony man like those guys watching football and dating women. I'm talking about a real man. What do you get when you come to my town? You get a guy like Joe Cristiano who will strap you to a chair and make you watch things that will bore you senseless. Not bored enough yet? How about Jeff Shrek, who has the personality of a wet mop after it's been wrung out? Max Cook? Why, he's one coasterless glass on the coffee table away from a killing spree. Just ask his buddy the counselor. Oh, that's right, you can't. They found him upside down in a barrel of Frankie Coppola's Red with a note taped to his shoe that read, "This is what you get for not returning my Charlie books when I ask you to. Signed, Max Cook." The police still haven't cracked the case. Billy Barrasa's got that Brooklyn apartment, freelance photography job, and top knot. But you'll be wearing artisanal cement shoes and sinking to the bottom of the East River before you finish saying the word hipster. Sometimes I get them all together in the same place and at the same time to talk movies, but I often ask myself why. It's a powder keg and everyone is bringing their own lit match. I lose a guy now and then. Did they ever tell you what really happened to Dave Pace? Of course not. They don't want you to know the real story. Oh, me? I know the real story, but let's save that for another episode. In spite of all these insults, in spite of all these insults and this murderous violence, it's rewarding to be working for Cutting Room Movie Squad. When the right film comes along and you get so into it, you don't even want to stop, not for a piss or even for a Mets game on opening day. You know, it's all worth it. Welcome to episode 99 of the Cutting Room Movie Podcast. As always, as usual, I'm your host, Tom Detloff. With me tonight is Joe Cristiano, Billy Barrasa, and Jeff Shrek, who, by the way, helped me write that monologue. So a lot of credit to him, too. So I definitely did not want to leave that out, Jeff.
I love that the whole off season you're like wringing your hands and pulling your hair out about the hijinks on the show because you're having such trouble with all the nonsense because we're all over you about your life and everything, and then you open up the first classic show and just like guns firing like all right, let's start it.
It's parody, right? It's spoof. We're spoofing, it's no big deal.
The biggest masochism, actually.
Fair enough. Tonight we're going to be talking about Duck Soup and Mel Brooks's Blazing Saddles, Joe. This is the classic part of our two-part episode after we did the Naked Gun last time around, Joe, the new release Naked Gun.
That's right. How a Marxist laughs. Shenanigans.
Definitely. But I'm doing Duck Soup, so we're going to get right into it in just a couple of minutes. I guess, Joe, how we doing otherwise? Pretty good?
So far, so good. I'm looking forward to talking about these two films.
Awesome. All right, well, let's just jump right into it. I'm going to introduce Duck Soup, so here I go.
He might not be a king, but he's got the gout like King Henry VIII. Please welcome the tobacco industry's leading advocate and our fearless leader, Mr. Tom, knock your socks off, Detloff.
It's amazing how a comedy from 1933 can stand the test of time. Cinema was just getting used to sound when Leo McCarey and the Marx Brothers got together to make their timeless classic Duck Soup about the leader of a fictional bankrupt country called Fredonia, who woos a rich woman in competition with its neighbor leader of Sylvania. As you know, Groucho and gang deliver well-timed sight gags as well as comedic dialogue that plays well in the ears even today. You know, I knew little, next to nothing about these boys from New York going into this, so this is nothing short of a learning experience for me. What I slowly began to realize was that these Marx Brothers were coming from a vaudeville background, touring on stage throughout the USA before making a transition into film that had to be incredibly difficult. Making a theater full of people laugh, well, you can get off on that high and excel your comedy to soaring heights, but doing this in front of a camera with little to no reaction had to be difficult. There must have been uncertainty about anything that they were doing. And this is what impresses me the most about these guys. They were pioneers in film comedy, kings. The confidence and balls it must have took to believe in their act is extraordinary. I'm certain that they were told that their act couldn't translate on screen and they should stick to theater and radio. Thankfully, they put themselves in front of that lens and delivered some brilliant comedic films like Duck Soup and A Night at the Opera. I urge our fans to discover this troupe that also includes Harpo, Zeppo, and my personal favorite, Chico, who I can watch 24 hours straight and still laugh my ass off. It's interesting how films have changed over the last century. Every genre kind of moves on. Drama has gone from Paul Muni to Marlon Brando to Robert De Niro to Sean Penn, from Howard Hawks to Alfred Hitchcock to Martin Scorsese to Paul Thomas Anderson. You know, sci-fi goes from Flash Gordon serials to Forbidden Planet to 2001 to Star Wars, and then even more Star Wars. Horror changes and documentaries change, but comedy pretty much stays the same. And someone like Groucho Marx, it could explain to you quite simply how it's done, both physically and through dialogue. I mean, this you could see from Monty Python to Benny Hill to even the Kids in the Hall. All the comedic greats in film owe everything to the Marx Brothers, all of them. They have set a standard that remains to this very day. They are an absolute treasure. They are brilliant. They are comedy. They are the Marx Brothers. And guys, we're talking Duck Soup here. Joe bringing us back a little bit to the past here. And you know what's so great about these guys?
Nice, man. I almost got a tear in my eye, Tom. That's finally, I fucking feel a little, not vindicated, but it just makes me feel good to share something that I love and have it be, and have someone respond to it. And I'm so glad that that works.
It's just that in everything that I and I love comedy, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's, arguably, within myself, like it's probably like my favorite genre. Like I really love comedy. There's nothing better than a good comedy. And I really had nothing, I mean, I knew nothing about these guys, and to put Duck Soup on, and I'll tell you what, I was just like, I really thought I was just gonna get like this whole nonsense that just was so dated and boring, and what I wind up watching is something extraordinary, because they, I realize, like I said, like I'm realizing that like good comedy, like, in film, it's steady, it's the same, you have to have the physicality and you have to have the dialogue. And amazingly enough, in 1933, I knew that there would be physicality there, but I was just really surprised about how good the dialogue was, and how well delivered it is. It's really, really smart stuff. And honestly, like I think Chico is like a really good actor.
He's great, man.
I'm serious. Yeah, I'm dead serious. I think he's a really, really good actor. And I'm like just watching this guy like do his thing. And like I said in my intro, film is like just so, I mean, it's so new, it's just so raw at the time. And I mean, these guys, I mean, to go from like getting, crowds, laughing at them, to getting off on that high, to just, being in front of a camera, it's like a band, like, playing in front of a crowd, and then they have to make a video work. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And
Yeah.
it's just so it's so obvious to me that I mean, these dudes weren't afraid of anything, and I think that's the important thing to realize here, is that they weren't afraid, and they were willing to take chances, and they believed in their material, they believed in themselves, and to me that's just really awesome.
Yeah, yeah, you said a lot there, man. How comedy works, I have no friggin' it's so hard, man, because it's something that you can't really pin down into a formula because sometimes, the stuff that we watch today, sometimes a guy's funny movie will work and then other times it just doesn't.
Hmm.
Like I don't it's hard to really pin that down, but what these guys were doing, obviously they nailed it, you know what I mean? And
Every time.
it influenced it well. I mean, they didn't always have, they had to stop doing what they did at some point,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know
yeah.
what I mean?
Let's,
But
yeah,
these movies are just friggin' they're magic, you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
And I think a lot of it has to do with exactly what you're talking about, is that they made that transition from live vaudeville theater to the movies. They knew what worked and what didn't work, and I suspect that a lot of because it wasn't so cinematic the way that we would define cinematic now, the way that productions are planned around how to shoot things and how many takes to do
Hmm.
and how all these angles, and it's a lot of construction. It's hard to get the comedy through all of that, all the mechanics of filmmaking.
Yeah.
Where back then it was a simpler sort of form of how to construct a film, and it was more theatrical. It was almost just like filming a vaudeville stage act.
Right.
So I think that that's why they were like at the peak of this at the vaudeville, and it was like almost they just hopped off of one stage and onto the other. And I think a lot of what they did was really successful because they worked out all of this stuff before live audiences. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And that's just like comedy has so much to do, and what you were saying in your review there with, not knowing or how it was going to work and
Hmm.
all that stuff. What these guys were fueled by, it seems to me, is just it feels live. You know what I mean? With these films, it feels like almost like you're watching a live picture.
Yeah, so they, like, exactly, and it's like, I mean, to be able to move that from one medium to another seamlessly is amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
because it could, like, honestly, like, I'm watching this and I'm like, I think that it could, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, it could have bombed. They couldn't, there's a chance there that they could not have gotten this right, that they couldn't.
It's just you said that they just believed in themselves so
It's
much. I just
they
remember.
had they had. I mean, that's what I just see. I just see some extreme confidence, like when I'm
Yeah.
watching these guys. Like,
Well, it's funny because they were like delivering it in front of live audiences, and I think that I watched a documentary that was oddly enough narrated by Leslie Nielsen. Well, not oddly, I guess intentionally,
uh
and they were saying how, they would try it out in front of an audience, and they knew how long to let things go for how long the audience was going to be laughing in the theater. You know what I mean?
sure, sure, yeah. All right. I mean, that's awesome, man. What
Yeah.
documentary is that?
I think it's called The Secret Life of Marx Brothers. Something. It's on YouTube. So
Interesting. Yeah, and I mean, it's just great to listen to Leslie Nielsen talk for even like an hour, which is great.
yeah, he plays it really straight.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not being
Oh
funny or
wow.
anything.
Right.
He's giving out just a documentary about these guys and their life behind it and their ups and downs and all that stuff is interesting. I mean, one other interesting thing about vaudeville is, ironically, the movies were vaudeville's downfall. Like these traveling comedy and variety shows. During the Great Depression, when they started basically filming these vaudeville acts. People, they were cheaper to go and pay a dime or a nickel to go and see the movie version, and why would you go and pay to see the Marx Brothers like 4 or 5 times as much, pay a ticket to go see them in New York, when you could just go into the movie theater and watch them? You know what I mean? So it was weird, because cinema, vaudeville fed the cinema, and then cinema beat down, made vaudeville obsolete.
Right, that's interesting. That definitely. Let's get some reactions from the other guys, because I'm totally curious. Well, I mean, I kind of get the feeling that Billy's going to be, like definitely with you on this, Joe. So let's start with Jeff. Jeff, have you watched the Marx Brothers before? Have you seen any of their films? Is this your first time? What's going on here with Duck Soup with you?
This was my first actual sit down and watch, because I'd see, to like show them in school. Like I'm sure I've seen like 3 or 4 of them, but just like I kind of have like pieces of memory of it. So this is my first one. And what is it? Like, it's like 68 minutes long, right?
Yeah, it's 60. Yeah, it's really fast.
Yeah. I'm going to say that it takes about 58 minutes to really get going.
Really?
Yeah.
Not your cup of tea, so to say.
Not really. And man, and I love what it did for comedy. And
I'm surprised.
And obviously I'm just talking about Duck Soup, like any of the other ones, like I could change my tune on, to obviously when I see them. But there's just something about something about Groucho that just seemed to, like, he lacked charisma and charm to me. Like his lines, the lines themselves are funny. Like, like reading a list of those one-liners, they're funny, but he just kind of like rattles them off in like what's like a monotone, and it's not fun like Stephen Wright either.
Right.
So it's just kind of like he's like it's like he has them on cards, and he's reading it, flipping the card, reading the next one, flipping that, and then occasionally punctuating it with that look at how much of a look how much of a cat I am, like the eyebrow thing.
Hey, Joe, can you believe this guy?
Well, it does seem a little odd to say that Groucho has no charm.
He's got nothing. Yeah,
I think that's pretty much the opposite of what I'm saying. I mean, you're of course you're entitled your opinion, man. I just think that I think the delivery, it's not. I guess not the way that comedians would deliver lines these days. I would just say that it's sort of understated, and it's kind of like he rattles it off without trying to bang you on the head with it. So it's like you gotta lean in and like pick out what he's saying. You know what I mean?
A lot of their fans, a lot of their fans seem to say that they deserve multiple viewings to really pick up on his humor and what he's saying and whatnot.
I mean, some of those things it takes, like, by the time you get it, they're on to another joke. Like,
by the time you get it, you're watching Blazing Saddles.
That's irrelevant. That's right. That's exactly right. It wasn't an elephant in the circus or whatever the hell it was. You know what I mean? You're like, what? And then by the time you like sort of pick it apart and figure it out, it's like they're joking about something else. You know what I mean? So. They're, I think they got
and that Harpo and Chico just kind of like they seem to be causing. Well, I guess the definition of chaos is that there's no reason for it, but it just seemed like, I don't know, formless, and like and then they were picking on that cart guy for no reason.
I'm really surprised, Jeff, because I think that. This seemed like something that like our father side of the family would really enjoy. I wonder if our grandfather.
I'm sure I even saw it in the living room.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That like I wonder if our grandfather was. Well, I'm sure he was. I mean, but then again, you never know with that guy. He could have been like, "Oh, that guy's a goddamn asshole." Who knows what the hell he was thinking? But I'm watching this and like I was like I'm being brought back to. some of the things that he did watch or liked, or Spike Jones, for instance. I mean, did you ever find that stuff funny?
I love that stuff.
Yeah, you do. All right, so but it just really made me think of things like that. But I'm surprised that this didn't have more of an effect on you. But that's cool, dude.
Once it hits the actual war and they start inserting what looks like real battle footage into what is supposed to be a comedy film, I really started, I really appreciated it then. Once the movie sort of became pure chaos.
You didn't like the mirror scene didn't do anything for you?
Yeah, that was the best part of. I respect how the art of it.
The mirror scene was like the whole movie, though.
Yeah,
that was it was a big chunk of them.
I don't know. I mean, the freaking trial was fucking great, right? The trial was in this movie, right? I don't want to start mixing them up.
The mirror scene is probably the best part of this film, Joe.
It's fucking brilliant. It's genius. It's genius, man.
Billy, how you doing over there, my man?
I'm doing well. I do have to defend Jeff a little bit there, and that I think the Marx Brothers actually had the same opinion of this movie that he has of it when it first came out.
Interesting.
They actually were not too fond of it, and a lot of critics said the same thing. It was just sort of aimless, and they didn't really dig the politics of it and everything. But I mean, the Marx Brothers in film, up until A Night at the Opera, they were not terribly successful because they already had a long career behind them, as you guys were saying about vaudeville and everything. And their movies were actually considered failures because it just they couldn't figure out how to translate what was a really funny stage show into film format, And the next one, the Night at the Opera, is the one where Irving Thalberg got involved. And he started sort of ramrodding plot down the throat of the Marx Brothers craziness, and then they kind of took off. But I think I want to say that
I thought this one was initially not as successful as their previous ones. I thought they were successful.
They did all right,
and then they went on to Universal, I think, right?
Yeah, but Groucho was always pretty unhappy with how the film productions were handled. And he loved Thalberg. He thought that Thalberg had the right idea about trying to actually create a plot and a structure for the anarchy to revolve around. But I mean, a lot of their whole Paramount period, a lot of the guys sort of disavowed for years after it was over. So. Yeah, I mean, it's not an unpopular opinion of these. It's only sort of in retrospect that everyone has looked back and gone, I mean, most people think Duck Soup is the best of the Marx Brothers movies,
I think it is, man. I like it better than Night of the Opera. I think it had a real resurgence, from what I understand anyway, in the 60s, which is actually would explain how I got to it, too. My father was a big fan of this movie. And I saw that. I think that the anti-authoritarian sort of just the irreverence and the just the rebellious chaos of it really just appealed to a 60s audience who were obviously in the midst of their own social revolution.
This was I mean, I saw this dozens and dozens of times when I was a kid. I love the Marx Brothers. I grew up watching them, and I just think they're geniuses. And this one I always thought was hilarious, but it wasn't until I think I was in my 20s that I hadn't watched it for a while, and I went back and looked at it again, and I was blown away, and I'm still blown away every time I see it, at how thoroughly it has such a firm grasp on how politics actually work in the world, and just goes around like punching in the nose everything about politics in every scene. And like the way wars are started, the way politicians behave and everything, it's not really in your face, but they know how to hit a bullseye on every single thing, And at the end, even I mean, it's kind of crazy. I don't even know if you could get away with some of the shit that's in there today, where it's like he's shooting out the window and he's gunning everyone down, and then someone says, "Your Excellency, you're shooting your own men," and then he just slips the guy $5 and says, "Keep it under your hat." And I was like, oh my God, like it's
Yeah,
brutal. Like
that says a lot. Yeah, that's
Mussolini
Or,
banned this movie.
That's great.
Yeah, and
that should have been the tagline.
well, when the
underneath
Marx
Banned
Brothers
by
heard about
Mussolini.
it, they were ecstatic. They were like, "That's brilliant. That's the best response we could have ever hoped for." You know?
I think what was the line? While you're out risking life and limb, we'll be in here thinking about what a sucker you are.
Exactly. Yeah, it's. I love the anarchy of it, but yeah, I mean, the aimlessness of it was definitely. I love it now because I mean it's it's clearly. I think that there was a pretty close tie. I don't know if it was deliberate or not between what the surrealists were doing during this period, like the Luis Buñuel, Dali collaborations and stuff, and what these nutcases were up to, where it was just very non sequitur. It was just ricocheting from one thing to the next, and I love it now. I mean, I like that there's no real structure except the poke in the nose every cliche about politics you can hit.
Yeah, it's thinking about like what I could what I could compare this up against. I guess back in the 30s and 40s and whatnot is like Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello and things like that. I just like watching Duck Soup and watching a little bit of their other stuff. I mean, they're. I don't know, Billy. I mean, it seems to me that like a guy like Groucho Marx is like, he's willing to take things just, a little bit further than just, your basic, your basic comedy. He wants to say something, and it's funny to me, that you say that he was unhappy with a lot of these movies.
Yeah. Well, I think that they felt. I think that he felt. He always had a lot of ambition. I mean, he was he was an avid reader. He corresponded. He cultivated friendships with guys like T.S. Eliot and Dali, and he wanted to do things that were better. And so I think he was just very dissatisfied with the sort of everything just sort of ending up in a pile like a mess on screen. And yeah.
Do you think if time was different for him, could he have been more of like more of a Woody Allen? If he was around later, like could he have been someone that was making films like Woody Allen, so to say?
Maybe. I know he loved Woody Allen.
Did he?
Yeah, he said in interviews because later in his career, the 40s and 50s were a rough patch for the Marx Brothers, and Groucho ended up doing the TV show What's My Line?
Yes, which was successful,
which was hugely successful, and it was shot. It was not shot live.
Was it You Bet Your Life?
You Bet Your Life. That must be it. Yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
So, yeah.
And it was not shot live deliberately so that they could record for a few hours and then edit things down later, because he improv'd everything, and so it gave him a chance to just basically do his shtick, interacting with people,
sure,
interviews and everything. But in the 60s he was doing a lot of interviews and going around, and he said of Woody Allen that everyone said that Woody Allen stole his routine from the Marx Brothers, and he said no, Woody Allen's a complete and total original. He's the best that ever was. So
so Woody Allen still jerks off to that every night.
I have no doubt.
Well, Woody Allen was hugely influenced by.
Sure.
It's obvious. Yeah,
absolutely. But it's like going from like I said, like Woody has was able to do things more his own way, I guess, and take chances and say
more
things.
Auteur.
Yeah, that's the word I'm looking for. And you know what, too, Billy? It's really wild that Groucho immediately had success in TV, as like he did with the movies. I mean,
it took a while for that too. I think there were several shows that failed, and then eventually he found that one, and it stuck. It was a success. But I mean, he had a great career after that. I mean, these guys are amazing. This whole period of time, I'm obsessed with. I love. By the way, Tom, I want to get to the point here at some point here. You've never seen Marx Brothers movies before?
No, I've never watched them.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph, how is that possible?
I don't know. It's just sometimes, it's things like that happen. I've never been, you
don't like old movies though, do you? Like
it's not even just about that. Like, no one ever turned me on to them. Like like Abbott and Costello I'm familiar with because an uncle of mine used to watch Abbott and Costello when I was a kid. So when they would play, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein or The Invisible Man or whatever, like I'm familiar with, like, those movies pop into my head. I'm totally familiar with them. Like I could talk about them probably right now if I had to.
Yeah.
But the Marx Brothers, no one has ever, guided me into them. No one has ever said, let's watch Animal Crackers or let's watch A Night at the Opera or Monkey Business or whatever. No one had ever done that with me. So I was really, I knew Groucho Marx just because of the glasses and the nose. Like that's all I really knew. What was on the surface, I never really knew what was underneath there. So, like I said, to me, this is a complete and total learning experience from which is you're right, Billy, which is pretty fucked up.
It's amazing. But it's weird because the Groucho brothers, the Marx Brothers, loom so large in my idea of comedy that it's like impossible for me to imagine there are people who have not seen even a single Marx Brothers movie.
Yeah, to me, it's like I'm like thinking of I'm going back to like Monty Python. I didn't realize that there was this. I knew there was a Marx Brothers. I had no idea about their impact.
It's just so funny because every like 10 or 15 years, a comedy movie will come out and it'll be like, they invented how to be, outrageous and, and politically incorrect. You know what I mean? And it's just like something about Mary. There was that phase. And then, it's all these guys with the American Pie, and then like all this stuff.
And they're making, and those guys, the Farrelly brothers, they're making good comedy, but it's really just the same thing that they were doing.
They're just turning.
The point is that like
they're shocking.
It doesn't take much, to have to say this to have the dialogue and to have the physicality, and like if you have that, you're golden. There's not much more you can do.
And it's this political. At the heart of it, these types of comedies is like this political incorrectness where they're not afraid to offend somebody or offend people. You know what I mean? And I think that it's just about being rebellious, which is really just that it's just joyous to watch somebody just really, screw with the authority, the foil. The foil is such a huge part of. And these guys just fine-tuned, being able to kind of just work with the straight man and just joyously turn that straight man upside down, and shake him.
There's no doubt. Groucho is 100% the leader here, without a doubt, of these, of this troupe, right? He would be the man in charge.
How am I doing, boss? That's a good one, ain't it, boss? It's just so fucking ridiculous. Yeah, he's the boss. He's the judge.
He's the guy. Yeah, it's funny. It's just that Chico is just. I don't know. And like, I kind of hear what Jeff is saying. A little bit with the way Groucho. He's not. I don't think he shines as much on screen as Chico does, Joe.
Man, when you first start watching these films, you're always just attracted to him because he just with that for some reason he's just the center of the movie,
Why though?
Obvious center. I don't. Well, it's the mustache and it's the costume to some effect, right. But he is also just the guy around whom everything like revolves. But these times that I was watching it, for the first time, I really enjoyed watching Harpo. But I love Chico too, man.
Yeah.
But I was just really amazed by Harpo, man. I never gave him the attention that I did this time around, man. And I loved what he was up to.
When I was a kid, it was Harpo, because he's just like he's a little child's id gone wild, right? Like he's just like in Duck Soup, they go into the guy's office and he's just chopping off his coattails and then pasting glue on his backside and like putting a mousetrap on his hand, and it's just like pure childish mischief unleashed,
Yeah, and you don't have to get. Like the other guys are talking, he's not saying anything.
No,
so it's like there's nothing to get except what he's doing physically. So that's why a kid would love him.
Except that he's actually doing exactly what the rest of them are doing with their dialogue and wit, especially with the guy, with the vendor, the street vendor or whatever. He's just, the low-ranking figure of authority. You know what I mean? Like, Firefly or whatever, Rufus Firefly. He's going after the president of Sylvania. Harpo's going after the peanut vendor or the lemonade vendor. And sticking his feet.
There was
there
was a great formula for the Marx Brothers thing. With you guys are talking about Groucho being the authority, but the best part about that was that he was an authority in their trio, but he was always the worst person to put in charge of anything in the real world, quote unquote. So he's the president of this country, and he's just like a mole for chaos. And
and he enlists those other.
And he brings in these other two lunatics and just destroys the system. It's basically like watching a functioning system introduced with a degree of chaos that just
and they're spies. I mean, he's bringing in.
It's so great.
Well, it's so funny. Groucho's like he's bringing them in knowing that they're going to undermine him even.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean?
He hires Chico because he's
undermining
being annoyed by Chico selling peanuts at the window outside. And then he says, he gives him a job.
Right. Probably because he doesn't want him selling peanuts outside his window.
Well, it's like, all right, my real job is to create hijinks, So even if this guy undermines my hijinks, at least it can only add to more hijinks, Like one of that great scene where Chico and Harpo are dressed up as Groucho in that lady's bed. Oh, was that Night at the Eye?
Joe, you're talking about 7 other movies.
Wait, was that it was?
Which one are you what scene are you talking about?
They're in the bedroom and Chico and Harpo are dressed up as Groucho.
Yeah, that's duck soup.
Is
it? Yeah. That's what leads to the mirror scene.
That's right.
They're all there to collect the plans, and
and
they're all dressed as Groucho in the nightshirt and nightcap.
Yes, that's right. It's friggin' hilarious, man. Jeff, I'm sorry you didn't like it, brother.
We lost him.
He's just pulled a Max Cook. All right, guys, we're gonna probably wrap it up with the Marx Brothers and move on to some Mel Brooks and Blazing Saddles. And anybody have anything else they want to talk about these? Throw anything out there about these guys?
If anyone wants a fun bit of Wikipediaing or deeper research, just check out the Borscht Belt scene and the vaudeville scene of the 1920s and 30s. Basically, every form of comedy that are the giants that everyone else is standing on their shoulders came out of this period, and it's amazing. Like the New York vaudeville scene, and then the entertainment resort scene in the Catskills and everything. It's an amazing thing. So
nice, Joe.
I just was thinking about the climax between the Naked Guns. So I'm just trying to run these through, compare the movies and how they all end in this big raucous scene of insanity, and how the Naked Guns ended in the political dinner,
right?
And
our Blazing Saddles is
yeah. And this one here is great, man. They just whipped it up. They whipped the froth up to a whip it up to a high froth. It's amazing that war scene at the end there.
Listen, nobody does it better than the end of the first Naked Gun, in my opinion.
That is a good one, man.
In my humble opinion, that is the last 15 minutes of any comedy film I've ever seen. It's pure gold, man.
This one might. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know. This one might. I think that maybe this one might challenge it. Be right up.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know. Just the madness that's going on when they're under attack in that house, and I mean, it's.
And every shot, Groucho has a different uniform. Harpo gets caught in the powder room.
What's that, Jeff?
I think that drawing his face on that vase or whatever it was that was on his head was the funniest thing in the whole movie.
That was hilarious. I agree with you. That's
all right, guys. Let's move on to some.
I'm sorry. I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Without Groucho Marx, there's no Bugs Bunny, and so that's
Yeah.
Credit to him for that.
That is true. That's a great point, Jeff. That is a very good point. All right, guys, let's move on to Blazing Saddles. Mel Brooks time. Billy Barassa is going to give the introduction. Billy.